Wentz steps up. Here comes the rush. He is going deep, and it is caught. And in for a touchdown, Deshaun Jackson.
Give the people what they want.
Roob, the Eagles are almost at the finish line of this 2020 season, and then the real drama begins.
Yeah, really. It's going to be one heck of an interesting offseason. Be a lot more intriguing than the season in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it will be, and maybe a few more answers coming this offseason too. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Barrett Brooks will join us in just a little bit to kind of go through what it's like to play in a game that doesn't really mean much for the playoff scenarios. We'll also talk to him about the offensive line and the future there. We had a chance to talk to Jim Schwartz, maybe the last time talking to Jim Schwartz, who knows, on Tuesday. So we'll get into some of his comments. But Roob, I wanted to start with something I actually wrote for NBC Sports Philadelphia.com. And this is something that kind of been rattling around in my head. And it's something we've really talked about for weeks now. Whenever a team is this bad, you always try to assign blame and you try to figure out whose fault is this. And it's something that Jeff Lurie is going to have to do when he takes him. He's already started this process, I'm sure, but something he's going to have to do to make these major decisions. And kind of where does blame lie for the failure of this team? And it's not an easy exercise. I tried to make it look scientific. It wasn't. I mean, it's kind of just a feeling thing. I tried to put reasons behind all of this, but you want to just go through it and you can kind of tell me if you think I'm right, wrong, and we can kind of play around with.
I think you're wrong. What do you got?
Thanks. You've seen it. I started off with the biggest portion of the blame pie going to roster construction, which is Howie Roseman's domain. I guess you can also include some of the scouting department in there or some of the personnel guys, but really it's Howie's department. 40%, I kind of waffled on the number here, but the one thing that never changed was that was always the number one culprit to me.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it, and, if you go 51%, it's like, when you buy ownership in a company, if you have 51%, you're really, you control. And so I think from that standpoint, you could say Howie's 51% because that's a little high. It doesn't leave you enough numbers for the other things. But I think there's a lot of factors, and this is so complicated because these things overlap and they're all kind of intertwined. And sometimes it's just impossible to tell if something is coaching or player development or scouting or just the wrong player. But I do think that this team's issues start with player selection. I just think roster management, whatever you want to call it, drafting free agents, who's on the team, they're just not good enough. There's just not enough good players. There's a lot of factors, but I think that's where it starts. And I think 40% is a good enough number. To start with. I think it's high. I think it's got to be the number one thing, whatever the number really is, whether it's 38% or 45%. I don't think there's any question that it's something that kind of has its tendrils throughout all the other things too. They just don't have enough good players. They don't have enough elite players. They don't have enough impact players, game-changing players. You watch, I know you're like me, I'm a football junkie. I watch every game that's on, and you see guys just jump off the screen. Defensive players, offensive players. Obviously, we talk about wide receivers a lot, but, safeties and linebackers. And the Eagles just don't have those guys that when you're watching an Eagles game, you see, there's some good plays. That was a good play. That was a good catch. You don't see those hyper-talented guys just jump off the screen. And that's what other teams have, and that's what this team's lacking, and that's that 40%.
When's the last time they had a player dominate a game?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, you have to go, you have to go back. You have to go back a couple years. They haven't had a defensive player of the week, and that's just a kind of a narrow way of defining it. They haven't had one in 2 years, and that was Fletcher. He had a couple sacks in the game. But yeah, to see a guy go out and just have one of those, oh my God, career days, it just doesn't happen. Miles gets 83 yards and we're all like, wow, Miles got 14 carries and 83 yards. But that's like, that's what good running backs do. And I mean, Fulgham had a huge day against Pittsburgh. They lost the game. I'm not even going to count that. But as far as a guy who had a career day and that helped lead to a win, I don't know, Foles in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's tough to figure it out. And it all comes down to drafting because, at times, and you can go to 2017, Howie really did a great job with free agents, but I mean, that covered up a problem. And since then, the problem still exists in that they're not drafting well and the cover up isn't there because all the free agents he's brought in haven't really worked. And that doesn't mean, look, I shouldn't say all of them. Some have here and there. You can certainly argue that the Darius Slay trade has worked. He's been a good player, but what he did in 2017 was so abnormal to win like that. It was so unsustainable. And now we're seeing why, because the drafts just haven't been there. They've drafted one Pro Bowl player since he's been back in power, and that's Carson Wentz, who got benched. So they just need better players. And that's not to discount the things that Howie's good at. But right now, the negative is outweighing those positives for sure.
Yeah, it's funny how, if you look at Howie's mid-range picks, there's, there's not a ton of them, but there's some decent players, Sayamalo and Milano was a late round pick, Sweat, Jalen Mills was a 7. He's had a nice career. I mean, Driscoll was a 4. I think he's a promising player. Even
Avonte Maddox as a 4 is a fine pick. It's just that he shouldn't be CB2.
Right. So there's those guys, but yeah, I think you build a great team in the first round, and then a little less in the second round. Although the Eagles have drafted as well the second round over the years as the first. The third round, you got to nail those picks. You got to get a good, solid starter. They haven't done any of those things, and it sounds like he's not going to be held accountable. I don't know. I have a world of respect for Jeff Lurie, but I think he's got a blind spot for Howie. I don't think all his team's problems are Howie's fault, and I don't think he's as bad as sometimes he's made out to be, because he has done some good things. And, if you're going to blame him for the players that he misses on, and there's certainly plenty, and they're dramatic, certainly J-Jaw and the guys they could have had, J-Jaw, but, there are some good players that he has found. There's just not enough. And it looks like there's not going to be a change. I think we'd all be surprised if there is a change. Maybe he'll have his role redefined. I would be surprised if even that happens. But I do think that...
even if that happens and he still has final say, well,
Yeah. Yeah, so I think... It's the biggest issue facing this team, and it's not a coincidence that when you don't have enough good players, you don't win enough games. It's just the injuries are an excuse. And you're right. The Super Bowl, you have to give him credit for doing what he did, but it was not a sound way to build a team, but it worked.
No, Alshon Jeffrey, Chris Long, Patrick Robinson, all these guys he brought in the year before. He brought in Brandon Brooks and Rodney McLeod,
Corey Graham,
Nigel Bradham the year before. All these guys, they're all free agents. Nick Foles coming back.
And they all had the best year of their career that year.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Blunt, maybe not technically, but yeah, they all had their best year in like a 5-year stretch that year. And for most of them, for a lot of them, they haven't done anything since. It's really a crazy dynamic. Not taking anything away. They did it. They won that game. They won those games. They were an incredible team to watch. It was an unbelievable run, but it was just an unorthodox way to get there.
Absolutely. And that was the biggest chunk of the pie. Next up was coaching at 25%. And I'm including really in this, it's the 3 top coaches, which is Doug Peterson, Jim Schwartz, and I guess to a lesser extent, Dave Phipp. This was tough because it was all 3. I think the bulk of it belongs to Doug, who has not a good year. And that's not to say he's not a good coach, because I think Doug is a good coach, but he's had a lot of really curious decisions this year.
Bad decision.
I don't think he's played to his team's strengths. I don't think he played to his quarterback's strengths for those first 12 games. I put a lot of it on him. And that's not to say they should fire him, because I don't know if they should. I'm not there, honestly. I'd actually probably lean that they shouldn't fire him if you had to ask me right now. But yeah, there's no denying that he hasn't had a good year.
Yeah, I think the two things that, and you just touched on them, that are most alarming to me are the in-game decisions that just make no sense. Like, what is he looking at? What is he thinking? And there's been a lot of them. But yeah, also not playing to his players' strengths is, it's almost like he's going to do what he's going to do, and whoever's out there is almost irrelevant. And you can't coach like that. You coach to what you have, and maybe he does it with Hurts more than Carson, but he doesn't. And it's something he was pretty good at, I think, in the past, was having a real good sense of how to get the most of who he had, and how to take the talent he had around him and make it work for his scheme. And there's just been none of that this year. It's almost like he's coaching chess pieces that have no, they're all kind of alike. And like when you're finally moving the ball with Miles, and all of a sudden Jordan Howard's in there, it's like, what are you thinking? But I think he's had a terrible year, and I just don't know how you get. It's almost like Carson. We talk about how did you get from here to here, and it's the same thing with Doug. How do you have a coach of the year, or he should have been a coach of the year, and an MVP candidate in 17 that 3 years later neither of them is the same guy? I don't understand how it's possible, and I don't understand how deep the one has to do with the other. I mean, they're certainly so connected, but it's because I think Doug's decline has really been as precipitous as Carson's. From the coach that he used to be to the coach he is now, from the quarterback he used to be to the quarterback he is now. And they're definitely related to some extent, but that's a long-winded way of saying I think 25% is a good number. I mean, he's responsible for everything that happens between those white lines, and he's been a terrible coach this year. And from punting at the end of that Bengals game to throwing to, I keep forgetting the guy's name,
Hakeem Butler.
Hakeem Butler on the only snap of his career to this day. All those decisions, and they helped put this team in that hole, going for it at the wrong time. Kicking field goals at just all that in-game stuff has been shocking, really. And it's been a bad year for him.
Yeah. I have injuries at 17%. It is an excuse, but it's a somewhat valid excuse in that I don't think anyone expected them to lose just about every offensive lineman, or, some of those things, there's not a way to prevent it. Now, some of it, this is where it kind of intertwines, because roster construction, if you're relying on older players, they typically get hurt at a higher rate than, or a more frequent rate than younger players. But I don't think some of it is just kind of dumb luck, and the Eagles have had bad dumb luck this year, but they've also had it in previous years. So it's hard to know exactly what's going on there.
Yeah, and Doug couldn't wait to use injuries as an excuse to what went wrong. And this is something that bothered me, and it just occurred to me last night. It was your question about, or it might have been. I think it might have been Jeff McClain, but he was talking about injuries and how why did this team decline so precipitously? That's twice I used that word. It's 2 times too many. And he said the first thing he brought up without hesitating was injuries. And he was asked to follow up, well, why is this team always injured? He said, well, it's a physical game. But you can't use that as an excuse. You can't say it's a physical game if you're using injuries as an excuse. You can't, once you start using injuries as an excuse for why you're 4-10-1, you disqualify yourself from saying it's a physical game. Because it's a physical game for everybody, but everybody's not 4-10-1. So you can't do that, and that really bothered me. It didn't really hit me till it was like 2:00 in the morning, and I'm sitting there like, man, something Doug said really didn't make sense. I mean, on the one hand, you're out there you're out there Sunday playing, playing Dallas with, I think it was 13 guys I counted who weren't on the roster on opening day. You don't have Rodney, and you don't have, obviously Brooks and Lane and Driscoll, and you don't have Maddox, and you don't have Cravon. We know all the guys that were, they're missing a lot of guys. So it is a very real thing. And, you're out there with 20 practice squad guys, and it's going to be hard to win that game. So I think it's a fair thing to raise. I think it does raise the question, why is this team always so injured? And that's just something for another day. And
it does raise questions about the overall depth of the team when you're talking about a roster construction standpoint as well.
Yeah, that's true. Although I think, like, on the O-line, I mean, if Matt Pryor's your 17th offensive lineman, I don't know how you're going to do better than that. He's your 5th right tackle, whatever. So it's look, I don't think if they were completely healthy, I don't think they would have been a great team. They wouldn't have been a 4-10-1 team. They might be 7-7-1 now. I don't know. I think to say it's an excuse for why you're not an elite team is wrong, but to acknowledge that it's been a factor in their decline, I think is accurate.
Sure. I have poor quarterback play at 15%. I'm obviously talking about Carson Wentz here. And this is tough because good quarterback play or great quarterback play can cover up a lot of this other stuff, really, and I think we saw that down the stretch last season. Carson Wentz played so well in those 4 games that it didn't matter that there were injuries. It didn't matter that maybe the roster construction wasn't great, because he lifted them up above all that. And not only did he not do that this year, he contributed to the problem actively by missing layup throws, by having terrible pocket awareness, by giving the ball away. So, yeah, I think he clearly played a role in this failure this season.
Yeah, and it's almost like you're not allowed to. It's like either none of it was Carson's fault or all of it was Carson's fault. It's like The reality is somewhere in the middle, and you can have bad receivers around you and a patchwork offensive line and still not throw to the ball right to the other team and still not take sacks, but just stand there like a statue. So I definitely think he's got a big role. I think 15% is a fair number. He didn't have great receivers to throw to. There's no question. He didn't get help by his play caller. He was hurt by his play caller. He didn't have great protection for much of the season. But that doesn't mean none of it was his fault. And enough of it was to be a big factor, and enough of it was to get himself benched. Is he the biggest factor in the decline? No, but he's a significant one. And there's no one player, I think, on the team that has been more disappointing considering where they came from. Maybe JP, you can make a case, but no, because he's also 39. Carson's in the prime of his career. He's 28. He just turned 28. So he's been the most disappointing player on the team, and look, I've been a Carson guy since he got here. I love the trades in 2016. I remember sitting in the auditorium and I was so excited when they got him, and Gunnar and I interviewed him, and it was really cool, just interviewing him in the auditorium. It's like, this guy's going to be this team's quarterback for the next 12 years. This guy's a star. And, just the run in 17. I mean, I've been as bullish on Carson as anybody. But you have to call it like you see it. He's been terrible. And I don't, doesn't mean you don't like him. It doesn't mean he'll never play well again. It doesn't mean you want him traded or cut or, it's shipped out to Siberia. It just means he's been terrible this year. And if you're honest with yourself, you got to say it.
Yeah. And then the last category, poor play, I put it at 3%. And this just means to me, guys who deserve to be on the roster, who I don't fault them for being on the roster, but haven't played well. And it's a small percentage, but I think Zach Ertz factors in. I don't think anyone minded that he was on the roster at the beginning of the year, but he didn't play well. Jason Kelce had bad snaps. Rodney McLeod missed a few tackles here and there. I wanted to include this because these things happen. They happen to every team, but I wanted to kind of show the disparity between the construction of the roster and good players making bad plays. And I think there is a big disparity there.
Yeah, and we had it out over whether that should be a category or not, which is pretty funny. We wasted way too much time talking about that. But I see your point. And good players making bad plays. Just guys who didn't play as well as they should have. Yeah, and I think that is a factor.
But the fact that it wasn't a big factor kind of lets you know about the construction.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of players that played below their level. They just aren't that good to begin with. You know, there's not a lot of guys who like, wow, he's just not the player he used to be. They're just like, that guy's never going to be any good. So I do think it should be. What did you end up 3%?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's I guess Ertz is probably the biggest one out of that group. I mean, you could say JP if you want. I don't know who else is there in that category. You mentioned Rodney.
At times there were other guys. I don't think overall. I mean, Kelsey at times those snaps were pretty brutal.
Goddard had some notable drops.
Yeah, Miles Sanders dropping the ball.
Fumbles, bad fumble by Miles down at the goal line. Yeah, so that's definitely worth counting those few percentage points. I'll give you that.
Sure.
At Nissan, we just made your choice for a new car an easier one than ever with our most exciting and fuel-efficient lineup. Choice is all yours. Now get great offers across our full line. Shop your local Nissan store today at nissanusa.com.
Joining us now on the Eagle Eye Podcast, presented by Nissan for the final time this season, our good buddy Barrett Brooks. Barrett, how are you?
What's going on, gentlemen? How's it going today?
It's going. It's actually, in a way, it's a good thing the Eagles are eliminated. We kind of talked about it, Roob and I, on our last podcast. We can kind of get to it now. We don't have to talk about this laughable playoff scenario. We can just talk about the end of it all. But it's a weird situation, too, because the Eagles, they have a game on Sunday. Doesn't mean anything for them in the playoffs, obviously. They're eliminated, but guys are still prideful. Some guys are. Some guys are prideful. Some guys are trying to put tape out. It's an interesting situation to be in as a team. I'm sure you've played in these types of games. What's that like in a locker room leading into a game that means different things for different people?
I was part of that 3-13 team, as Roob always likes to remind me of, but in 98. But it means a lot for a lot of different people. Someone like myself, I was at the last year of my contract, so I had to go out there and interview for 31 other teams. So I made sure I played hard. You look at other factors as far as guys just wanted to know where they were as far as the dynamics of the team that had contracts still with the Eagles. The coaching staff was about to leave. We knew that. So it was like, well, you're gonna have to make sure that you play to the best of your ability because they're gonna watch film on what they're acquiring when they come in. When I say we, I mean the coaching staff that's coming in, and that ended up being Big Red, Andy Reid. So, a lot of guys were, playing and some guys took a selfish role in it. They started playing for themselves, not playing within the framework of what the, offense, the defense, or special teams was. And some guys were just like, all right, these are my brothers, I'm going to continue to fight with them. And there were other guys that are like, I'm just going to collect this check and get out of here. I mean, there are guys like that also. But, I think that, Doug has his locker room still. These guys still respect him enough. They're going to go out there and play hard because they don't know what's going on. Nobody knows what's going on. They don't know if they're going to be, cut. They don't know if the same regime is going to be back here next year. They don't know anything about, what situation of the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be going into next year. So there's a lot at stake for a lot of guys, not just the quarterback situation, but, guys on the offensive line, are they going to bring in or draft new guys, because there's got to be some major changes going on. Look at the secondary. These guys got to play well because they definitely got to overhaul those guys. So, there'll be a lot of guys playing for different reasons, but I know everybody's reason is going to be to play hard this next game.
I think it's a little different because there's still a chance, a pretty good chance Doug will be back.
Right.
And at least some of his assistants will be back. So I think that's a little different than, in 98, we all knew Ray was We all knew. There was a funny thing. I think Phil Sheridan wrote a column about saying how Ray was going to get fired. And at his presser the next day, Ray says, Phil, why do you keep writing I'm getting fired? Everybody knows I'm getting fired. But
he already knew, yeah.
This is different because we don't know how major the changes will be. And, so I think for a lot of these guys, there's probably, a handful of guys that know they won't be back next year, but I don't think it's a huge number. So I would expect, because a lot of these guys are young guys who are playing because of all the injuries. And, so I think that's, maybe there's 10, 12, maybe 15 guys who kind of know they have a pretty good chance of not being here, but I don't think it's more than that. So for that reason, I think you'll see an honest effort out there from pretty much everyone.
Yeah, you're right. Because a lot of these guys are still under contract that are on this team. Bad contracts including. So you're right. I mean, they're going to have to go out there and fight, and I think that even without a contract, I think Doug still commands a lot of respect of the guys in that locker room, and they'll fight for him.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, I think there's personal pride on different levels. Honestly, I know myself, if I were in that situation, I think I'd probably find it hard to care, but that's, but I think some guys have that personal pride, and it's why they're in the NFL,
They'll be their right tackle position. They definitely don't care. I'm telling you right now. He definitely doesn't care.
Yeah. I mean, there are some, I did want to ask you about the right tackle, and we have seen, because of all these injuries, we've seen a lot of these young offensive linemen this year, too many of them, honestly, based on what we expected coming into the season. Your impressions of some of them, Barrett, like which of those guys do you think are keepers, and which ones would you rather not see again?
Matt Pryor just totally disappointed me in his effort, how he prepared for the games, how he went out there and played. I expected a lot more from him going into this season. I thought he was going to be a seasoned guy. When he went in and had the opportunity last year, he played well when Brooks was out. He didn't, I didn't see the effort. I didn't see him really acting like he cared out there. So I wouldn't mind if, he didn't come back. I know Jake Driscoll showed me a lot, being a young guy, going out there and really, not missing a beat. He played harder. He played better than Matt Pryor. He deserves an opportunity to stay here, and I think he will be here. He's a pretty good player. I'm mad he got hurt, because I think that might have been the most costly injury, during the quarterback's tenure, being here and playing, so Hurts really suffered. Once he left the game, he really suffered from his departure the most. And out of all the other injuries, he suffered the most because Driscoll at least gave him an opportunity to finish plays. He didn't get that opportunity with Matt. Even on the other side with Mailata played his butt off. He may have got beaten a couple times, but there was no give up. He fought to the bitter end. It was a couple of times he got beat. He went back and saved himself on the play, finishing guys. He's starting to turn into a dominant guy. He played very well, for considering the fact he hadn't played football. He's only been playing football for 3 years.
Yeah. Did you see a cheap shot on him, by the way?
Yeah, I
did.
Jalen
Smith?
Yeah, I did. I did see that.
I get that Mailata's supposed to run through that, but that's a cheap shot, man.
Yeah. Just because he's big does not, take away the opportunity. You got to call the call, So they were definitely wrong for that. But he did you see on the long pass play, on the quarterback counter play when he pulled around on the quarterback counter?
Oh yeah, Jalen Smith,
and he finished him. That's why he was mad. He was pissed off because he got finished. He got put on his butt. So yeah, I understand why he was mad the rest of the game.
What about some of the interior guys like Herbig, Opita? We didn't really see much of Jariga except on special teams. And either of those guys kind of.
I like Herbig because he's going to fight. He is what he is. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and blow you away with being a dominant pass blocker. But he can definitely do some things in the run game. He's a run blocker, and that's a lot of the reason why I didn't understand the play calling this last game. You have guys in there that want to run the ball. More big guys, this is the biggest offensive line probably you guys had in a long time. They was guys with some road graders. Why not use them? They're more used to, going forward instead of backwards. Their body types are one that you want to run the ball with them. And we didn't take advantage of it. I thought we should have. But I think, Herbig is going to compete. I mean, I don't know if it's likely, but if Kelsey does retire, I could see them easily, moving Sayamalo over to center, and then plugging Herbig in there at that left guard position with Malata, or maybe he competes with Herbig competes with the first rounder from last year. I forgot his name already. Yeah, Dillard. That's right, Dillard. Yeah. I try to forget his name. But maybe he competes at the guard position, because I don't think he can compete at the left tackle position. I think that Malata has it locked down. And then when, the starting right side comes back, that's still a really good offensive line. Herbig got a lot of reps. He got a chance to play, and he showed some ability in his playing. So, you got, Johnson back, Brooks, Sayamalu, Herbig, and Malata. That's still an offensive line that can compete in the NFL. So I saw a lot of good things. Opeta, I don't think that he's ready for this level. He didn't show me anything. He didn't. I needed, if you lack the size, you lack the mobility or anything, you got to show me that you can fight. I wasn't the most athletic guy, but I'm just going to fight you every single play, and I didn't see that out of him. Those are the things, the challenges you can take care of are, number one, being in shape, number two, knowing your playbook, and number three, playing as hard as you can and as violent as you can. Be aggressive. Those are the things you can control. You can't control anything else, playing time or anything else, but you can't control them. And the guys that control that are usually the guys that have some success in the league. Brett Toth, I don't know if he's ready yet, man. He might just not be an offensive lineman in the league. He went to a military school, so he played at 250, 260 his entire life and didn't pass block. He ran the ball. So other than that, I don't know what Prince is going to do, because we didn't see anything out of him, because he's been hurt the entire season. So it's still a lot of ifs or coulds in that offensive line, and they're going to have to invest some quality draft picks in the offensive line.
Well, let me follow up on what you just said about Dillard, because I get a lot of tweets from people asking me about Dillard at guard. He is a more athletic tackle who, he can move around a little bit. I guess he's got the footwork to do it. Does he have, what would it take for him to play guard? We saw him try to move to right tackle, and he couldn't do that. Does he have a chance to be a guard in this league?
To be honest, I don't think so. Just like you said, he's more athletic. I see him as a tackle, but I just don't see him starting in front of Lane, and I don't see him starting in front of Malata now. I think he's just a better player than Malata. Malata's got to be a physical, big, 6'8", 360-pound mountain that's just really learned the game, and he's starting to see what it is to be physical. He found something that, he didn't think he really had, and that's to have some physicality on that offensive line. And he showed the ability to go out there and really be a dominant guy once he starts playing physical. Once you've gotten that itch, once you go out there and wet your tongue and you started to taste blood, it really changes you as a player, because now he has something to look forward to that he can add to his game. He was already an athlete. He's a supreme athlete. He's huge in stature. But now that he tasted his own blood, he tasted somebody else's blood, now he's going to start playing aggressive too, and it's going to really complete his game.
That's the thing with Dillard. Like, I get that maybe if you're short of guard, you want to play. But, man, you would be like wasting the good things that he has, because, the thing he has is his athleticism, his quickness. And he had to work to get this strength just to play tackle, and now you're gonna. I don't know if he could play guard.
But I don't know. Are you going to keep him around? Here's the thing: they like versatility. They want their backup tackles to be able to play both sides, to be that big V guy who can play in different, like 4 spots.
Well, I think he has to be that. That's what he has to be. He has to be a swing tackle. It's not that he couldn't play right tackle. He just didn't want to. He didn't want to entertain it in his head. So he figured, all right, if I play bad, they won't ask me to do this anymore. Well, if he's going to make this team, or he's going to want to play or dress on Sundays, he's going to have to be that guy. He's going to have to be a swing tackle. And that's why I said entertainment guard, because they might start him just to give him a bone at guard. That's one reason I said that. I don't think he could play guard. I don't think he could play anywhere, because he needs to go see the wizard. He needs to go get a heart. At this point, he's just too soft. He doesn't want to play the game. I thought he had something when he came into camp, and eventually, he was. I have put it like this: I have never seen somebody so happy to be put on IR. I've never seen it before. He was actually skipping because he was on IR. He didn't really want to play, man. If you want to play, you go out there and you try to play. I didn't see him try to play. I saw him get dominated time in and time out in camp. This is just in camp. He didn't want it. And, at least Mailata got mad, threw his helmet down a couple times because he got beat, because it meant something to him. I didn't think it meant anything to Dillard to get beat. I
will say that, Mailata got beat quite a bit at camp. I was, and his teammates were bullish on Dillard.
Yep.
I was looking forward to seeing him play this year. I don't want to ding him too much for getting hurt. That was kind of a freak thing. But yeah, I don't know if he can recover and take back that job from Mailata, who's played at just such a high level.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Can he come back and take it? And that should be it. He should be able to compete and take it, not just give it to him because he's a first rounder. It shouldn't be the case. He should have to go out there and take it from Mailata. And I know he won't be able to take it from Mailata.
What's your level of concern, both of you guys, with Lane? This is an ankle injury that's, been a factor for 2 years now.
That's huge.
Like Dave said, when you start talking about your ankle collapsing, that's never a good sign. What's your confidence level that he can, return to that Pro Bowl level that he was at from 17 to 19?
I think he still can return to that Pro Bowl level, but how long can he sustain it? That's the biggest thing. Just you said with ankles, that's the major part of our game as an offensive tackle. You have to have ankles that are mobile, flexible, because you get caught in so many awkward positions playing out there on an island. It's not like you have a small place, a phone booth that you're fighting in at the guard position. But you're out on an island. You never know what's going to happen. Your body gets contorted and contorted in different directions. And your ankles have to be able to sustain those type of angles and be able to have some power points while you're in those type of positions. And I don't know if he can sustain those power points with your ankles like that. So I really believe he will come back and be a dominant guy, but can he sustain that over a season? Can he be that dominant over the season? That's going to be tough because, I love Lane. Lane's physical. Lane has great confidence. Lane will go out there and dog you out. But what if he just tweaks it a little bit? It's one of those things that becomes a nagging injury throughout the year. And once you start to get those nagging injuries, it's hard to, come back from them.
Yeah, and Lane, he's kind of one of those guys. And there's some offensive linemen who are just naturally big. And they're just big guys,
Yeah, like
and
myself.
Yeah. Seriously, you're just a big guy. But there are other guys who kind of have to play above a normal weight for their body type. And Lane's always been that guy to me.
Yeah, Opeta too.
Yeah, they're just those players who, Lane, when he's 10 years out of the league, is going to look unrecognizable. He's going to be a little skinny, tall guy.
Right.
And it makes you wonder about the cumulative effect of that, having that extra weight on an ankle that's kind of been messed up. And while we're talking about it, there's no guarantee that Brandon Brooks gets back to playing at the all-pro level he was at. And that's scary because you're talking about your two best offensive linemen coming off serious injuries, over 30.
In a row, years in a row.
Yeah.
So, and we don't know when else he's going to come back.
Right. And that's another thing, there are some serious issues in the offensive line that I haven't seen in a long time. These guys, not to say that they're brittle, but, you start seeing a pattern because the guys just can't sustain the same brutal contact and brutal physical play that they're accustomed to playing at. They're used to being dominant, very, very physical type of players. Brandon Brooks is a physical guard. He wants anything you want to give him. He wants all the static right there. He's going to fight you right there. And, in order to sustain that, your body's going to go through some stuff, man. So, that's just one of the things with getting old, man. Father Time is undefeated.
Yeah, there was a point in his career where we thought, man, Jason Peters, nothing's going to catch him.
Right.
And it caught him in a big way.
Yeah, hopefully, this is the end of his career, and he doesn't want to come back. You never know. But I said the same thing. I said, if it was left up to me, I would play forever. But no, I'll start seeing that Mike linebacker come. Like, I'm going to get that Mike line. I'm going to get him. I'm going to get, and then there he goes. I can't get him now. It just happens. And once you see it happening, there's nothing you can do to slow it down.
Do you know what percentage of our viewers and listeners know what a phone booth is?
Right. Right. Fighting in the phone booth. You know, it's a small space, and that's where the guard is. You know, guard the center. They're fighting in that small little space right there.
When's the last time you were in a phone booth?
Right. There's all these cell phones and everything. The phone booth. Now, you know what they think a phone booth is now? Where Superman changes into his costume. That's Ray probably even know about that.
No, that's right. They don't know who Superman is.
Right.
I was driving up in Maine, and there was an old time hotel. It was on like old Route 1. It was an old hotel, like one of those like motels, and you know, there's like tumbleweeds rolling by and everything. And they had an old time phone booth in front of the place. Wow. And it was so weird to see it. I actually got out and taken pictures of the phone booth. It was like, being in a museum or something.
Yeah. Every once in a while, you'll see a rotary phone. My parents had a rotary phone in my house growing up downstairs. Okay. So I know how to use a rotary phone, but I don't think.
I had a rotary phone when I started covering the Eagles, Dave.
How about this? There are no such thing as home phones anymore. Who has a home phone?
My parents do.
My parents, yeah.
Mine don't. They only have. My kids would know what a home line is to save their life. You know, everything's.
My parents only use their cell phone. My parents turn their cell phone off when they're not making a call. When they're not in the car, I don't know why you turn it off. Well, I wasn't planning to use it.
That is great. That is great.
The purpose of having it, but anyway.
I think I'm going to try that after this pod. Just turn my phone off.
Wait, I want to hear both of you. Give me your best prediction for opening day starting line next year.
If you want to go first, I'll go Lane, I'll go Brandon, Seomalu, Herbig, and Mailata.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. I'm similar, except I think
we always go left to right, Dave. I don't know. Brandon,
I always go left to right. It threw me off when he went right to left.
Hey, Lane and left tackle.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say Mailata, Seomalu. I think Kelsey's kind of a toss-up right now, but I'll say Kelsey, Brooks, and Lane.
He's had a tough one, man. He had a tough year this year, man.
He has. Really something, and I'm not in his head, but something tells me maybe he wants to go out on a better note than this season.
You're right. You know, let me see. Teams are game planning him now. You know, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but look how many teams now line up the bigger guys, the bigger tackles, head up or on a shield or a tilt on him, because they understand that, you know, he can't hunker down like he used to. And so because of that, I think that's a lot of the times where the bad snaps are coming from, because he has people right there on him.
Yeah, he's trying to get out of his stance a little quick.
Yeah.
I think the odds of Kelsey, Brooks, and Lane, those three lining up on opening day is not great. You know,
you're right. Yeah.
Questions about all three of them. I mean, Brandon got hurt so early. You would think he'd be healthy by opening day. He's probably healthy by now. Lane had the surgery early enough that, you know, I mean, he's going to have a long period of time, and who knows what Kelsey's going to do. But it's a lot to ask. They're all in their 30s. They're all dealing with their own stuff. And ideally, you'd love to see those guys out there for another year. But, yeah, I mean, like we saw with JP, man, when you lose it quick. So we'll see.
Well, Kelsey's held together right now by bubble gum and duct tape. Yeah. I'm telling you.
Every year he is, though.
Right. Right.
By this point in the season. But we know he'll play hard on Sunday. That's the one thing you don't have to worry about.
Absolutely.
All right, Barrett, we appreciate it, man. We hope you had a great holiday, and Happy New Year.
You too now. Happy New Year, guys.
If you're a football fan, you need to check out the game Sunday night 7 on the NBC Sports Predictor app. There's no reason not to play. It's totally free, and it's got $2 million in guaranteed cash prizes this year, with $100,000 up for grabs every week. Just make 7 predictions about what's going to happen on Sunday Night Football for your chance to win some serious money. Now, download the NBC Sports Predictor app or head to NBCSports.com/predictor to make your Sunday Night 7 picks. Dave, I know you were really excited that game got flexed to primetime Sunday.
I had a few choice words for the NFL. Well, I mean, how miserable is that? Yeah. I got to be careful here because it's the NBC game. I don't want to get fired, but I was just upset that no one wants that. You know, no one wants to be up in the middle of the night watching the Eagles finish out this miserable season. Really. but I guess you got no choice. The only good thing is everything else will be settled, so we'll know right away what draft pick they'll have. We'll know right away their opponents for the next season, so that'll be good. But yeah,
at least it's not the worst thing is road Sunday night games. Like especially when you have a 6 a.m. flight, or if you're in Washington and you're like, should I drive home and get home at like 5 in the morning, or get a hotel and then check in at like 2 in the morning. But yeah, so at least it's at the link.
That's true. We had a chance to talk to Jim Schwartz on Tuesday. Who knows? Maybe the final time of him doing media. And it's funny, he was asked some big picture questions, and he said, well, those are things for after the season. And when he was reminded that, yeah, but Jim, you don't talk to us after the season, he goes, oh, yeah, well, you're right. That was it. It's really convenient. I don't know if it's the end for him. It might be. What'd you make of him on Tuesday?
Yeah, it might be. I kind of think I think he'll be back, but certainly not a slam dunk. So many of this team's defensive issues have, like you said, have had to do. I think more of this team's defensive issues than offensive have had to do with injuries. I think there's a chance he's gone. I also think there's a fair chance he'll be back. I think it's probably more likely he'll be back. Neither way would surprise me. I think this team's defensive issues have been mainly injury related, whereas I think the offense has been more coaching related. But sometimes you just need a new approach, a new look, a new start. I think this defense has played well over the years, considering they've really had 2 elite players, Fletcher and Malcolm, and Slay this year. But there's never been the talent level on defense to be a great defense. They just never had it. And, I think Jim has done as well as he could do with what he has. I think sometimes he gets he's a little slow to make changes, just because he believes in what he's doing, and he's true to his beliefs. I think a lot of coaches are like that, but I don't think this team's defensive issues are mainly his fault. But sometimes a new face, a new approach, a new look is good, and it certainly could be the case now.
Yeah, I think there's sometimes a little stubbornness to Jim, both with scheme and with his guys. But overall, I think he's a pretty good coach, talking to him on Tuesday, some of it stood out to me. We talked about Doug Peterson so quick to use injuries as an excuse, and Jim wouldn't bite on that even a little bit.
And I like that about him. I appreciate that about him. Doug was asked about what went wrong, and man, he just clicked into, injuries. Jim will never use that as an excuse. He's really all about accountability. He's like, no, every team's got injuries. We're not going to go there. We just weren't good enough. I wasn't good enough. I like that. And I think it's something I don't like about Doug. He does make excuses. So that's, it's something I appreciate. And I think he's generally been pretty honest about, he won't throw players under the bus, but he's pretty honest in general about, he'll say, we're just not good enough. And, if they lose a game 13-7, say, well, Jim, your defense played great. You only gave up 13 points. He said, well, we gave enough points to lose, so we did not play well enough. And I think that's important for players to hear, that, he sets a really high standard. He's got all these practice squad guys and street free agents and guys who are retired and cast-offs, and he's got and he does the best he can with what he has. But I like his approach. I like his accountability. The players, you just never, even BSing with guys in the locker room, you don't hear guys say bad things about him. I think he's well liked. Guys play hard for him. And he's just never been blessed with a tremendous amount of talent here. This is they won a Super Bowl with how many great players?
On defense?
Malcolm, Fletch, and BG had a really, really good year in 17. Had a great year, I would say. Probably should have been a Pro Bowler that year, but yeah, I mean, he's had rotating quarterbacks since he got here. He's never had good linebackers. Singleton, I mean, I guess Kendricks, at the beginning was pretty good, but he's never had that elite talent. And he's done.
Nigel was pretty good for a little bit.
Yeah, he was pretty good. And, Camus was okay. I mean, he's had guys who are okay. You don't win a Super Bowl without talent, but, the elite level, just never had that.
And the one thing people always bring up that they act like, this is off on a tangent, but this one always bothers me, that because the Eagles defense got shredded in the Super Bowl, they weren't good before that. Like they were great in the 2 games before that.
They were incredible in those 2 games. And they were really good in, you look at the New Orleans playoff game. And the Chicago playoff game, they were incredible on defense in that game. So it's really just one of the, 6 playoff games. They gave up a lot of yards. People tweet to me all the time when they're ripping Jim Schwartz, which for some reason people do all the time. They're like, oh, they gave up this, 600 yards in the Super Bowl. And I always tweet back the same thing. Yeah, that ruined the parade for a lot of people. It's like, well, this parade's great, but man, they gave up all those yards. Like, it doesn't work that way. They won the game, and they made a play, a historic, legendary play against the greatest quarterback ever. In the final minutes. I mean, it was astonishing. And Brandon Graham, I mean, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but I think that play really kind of, encapsulated Jim Schwartz's defense. I mean, they just kept coming and kept coming. They rushed the passer 60 times in that game, and they finally, on one of the last plays, they made a play that changed the course of human history. Yards doesn't matter. I think a lot of it is, if you play fantasy football, you probably don't like Jim Schwartz. They give up a lot of yards and stuff. But like even the Dallas game, they're out there with like 3 regular starters, and they ended up giving up 37 points. They gave up a late touchdown. But, the league average is over 25 points a game. I mean, that's an average game. You give up 25 points, and they give up 30. I think they've given up 30 points fewer than any team in football, other than I think the Ravens and Steelers since he's gotten here. So he's been a good, solid coach. And, if they make a change, it's understandable. If they don't, it's understandable. Personally, I would love to see him coach with, let's say they draft a corner. Let's say they draft Surtain, and you have him and Slay, and you have Hargrave coming back, and Fletch and Sweat, and maybe you get a linebacker, and you have Singleton with a full year. I'd like to see Jim Schwartz for once coach with a full set of weapons, and I think they'd be pretty good.
Yeah, we'll see. The only other thing I wanted to bring up from Schwartz was about Darius Slay. He kind of came to his defense, and he was basically asked, like, hey, you guys brought in Darius Slay to be this top corner. Has he lived up to that? And I thought Schwartz was honest. He said, he's done what we've asked him to do. He's put himself in a lot of tough situations that's allowed me to call better games. But he'd probably admit that he's given up some too. And I think that's the best way to describe Slay this year. He hasn't been elite. He hasn't been, one of the best corners in the league. He's been pretty good. He's been clearly the best cornerback they've had in years.
Yeah, since Asante, right?
Yeah.
Bar.
Yeah, the 2 bad games were, and Jim would fight us on calling them bad games, but I would say they were bad against DK Metcalf and Devontae Adams because, look, I understand Jim's point that having Slay one-on-one allowed them to help other places, but Slay's allowed to make plays too. He's supposed to be a Pro Bowl type player. He should make those plays, but when you look at the other games he's played, I mean, Amari Cooper did nothing on him this year. Michael Gallup did nothing on him this year. Terry McLaurin in the first game did nothing on him this year. So there have been really good moments for Slay too.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I would give him a B if I was grading a season. I know. I think. Are you going to do final grades? Where would you be?
Yeah, relative to expectation, probably. I think he's about as good of a corner in this league before the top level.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I kind of expected a little more. I expected A-, B+, but I think he's been really good. I think the lack of consistent pass pressure. There's been times where they get great pressure, but I don't think they've gotten great pressure consistently. And I think that's hurt them. Quarterbacks have had a lot of time in the pocket for the most part against this team. And I mean, that's really league wide too. It's hard to play cornerback. I mean, everything's pass interference. Everything favors the offense and the quarterbacks. Yeah, I think he's had a good year. I think he's had a good year. I wouldn't say I'm disappointed. Probably expected him to be a little more, make a few more plays, but the ball's not going his way that much either.
Yeah, it's a tough deal. I don't have anything else. How about you?
No. When's New Year's? I don't even know. What's today, the 29th? So we have one more podcast in 2021. So we won't wish everyone Happy New Year's just yet.
Yeah, we're not telling you that yet. You have to wait. You have to wait for that.
We're going to leave you hanging. We're going to leave you guessing.
Will they wish us a Happy New Year? Will they not? Well, you'll have to listen to the next podcast.
We wish people a miserable year.
We might. You never know.
You ever go to Times Square on New Year's, by the way?
What?
You ever go to Times Square on New Year's?
No, that's too many people for me.
I don't even like being in a crowded elevator now. But when back in the day, I went twice. Believe it or not.
Did you really?
I had a blast. I mean, it was fun. I mean, I probably wouldn't do it in a pandemic, but
I don't think I actually heard that they're going to drop the ball this year, but that whole area is going to be closed off, obviously.
But it is kind of cool. I mean, it is kind of cool to be a part of that and be there.
Yeah, not for me. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, do us a favor, rate and subscribe.
Why don't we do a podcast live next year from Times Square on New Year's Eve?
Rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We always appreciate that. For Roob, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you guys soon.